and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, I know a lot of our listeners out there in the wide, wide world are female business owners and solopreneurs. And you know what? The reality is when you are doing a business all by your lonesome, you do all the things, right? And one of the things that I keep hearing from our listeners that they want us to simplify is how to market ourselves, market our business. So I really want to dive into the topic of how to be a storyteller for your business. So when I was thinking about who to bring on specifically for this topic, I remembered, Bernadette Knoll had recommended an amazing person, and this is my guest today. Her name is Elizabeth McGuire. She's a writer, photographer, and mother of three. Over the years, Liz's work has appeared in print, online, and on stage. Her favorite projects weave together her love of language and photography, and she enjoys helping businesses, nonprofits, and families tell their stories in powerful, personal ways. Her most recent undertaking is the Sibling Revelry Project, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode, an ongoing photography project capturing the spirit of sibling through images and interviews. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Elizabeth McGuire. Hello, Liz. How are you?
Great.
So, Liz, we know you're a photographer, we know you're a copywriter, and you weave these things together in the work that you do. So let's simplify for our listeners today how to truly be a storyteller for your business. What does that mean to you, first and foremost, being a storyteller? And why is this a skill that you think is so important for small business owners to cultivate?
Well, I think first of all, you have to look at the why. And it's so important to humanize an organization, a business, to put a face on the mission of whatever you're doing. It makes your mission clearer and more powerful the more you can humanize it. I also think if you can give that story a visual element, you're just, again, adding layers to it. And, in addition to that, you're giving your audience this new perspective, and I think anytime we can help our audience see something from a different vantage point, be in somebody else's shoes. If you can provide that to people, I mean, that's a huge service, in addition to kind of promoting what your mission is. So that's kind of the why. And, luckily with social media, it's so easy nowadays to get that story out there. So.
Now, you work with quite a few clients in Austin, Texas. You are from my most recent hometown. And I know in particular you work with Leadership Austin, and you've worked with Austin Parks Foundation in the past. So when these kinds of clients come to you, what is it that they're looking for your help with in particular?
Well, they're looking, the best clients have a solid understanding of their own mission. And so they're just having you capture that. And you might be interviewing like stakeholders, like for the Parks Foundation, for example. I go out, I interview some of like their top volunteers, some of their biggest donors, some people who are pulling events together. And, all these people who play a big role in making that organization successful. And again, it gives people a broader understanding of what that organization is doing, that it's not just I'm not sure how many staff they had, maybe 15, it's not just those people, it's like this big, broad group. And so you have a better understanding of their mission. And you're more invested in it when you hear about all these other people in the community who are making things happen for them. So, again, that's like, that's where you start. Who would people be interested in, would draw you into that business or organization?
Well, and I think that's what you were saying earlier, is that when you use photos and you use words together, you're building a very multi-dimensional picture of what this can be very detached and feel very artificial. Like, you really need to be able to see what this nonprofit is like from the volunteers' point of view, see what this nonprofit is like from the client's view, see what it's like from the donor's view, from the staff's view, from the outside world. And I think once you start building those different lenses into what it is you're building, it can be something that's so much more than words on paper or words on a website.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've worked with the Austin School District, or for, I should say, this foundation that is sort of an arm of AISD. But, I went in and was telling stories about where some of the funding has gone, some of these grants that have been given. So, after these schools are getting grants from the community, I mean, it's nice to have a follow-up and really see how this money was used. And you're going in, you're in these incredible programs where they're, organic gardens with, these schools that haven't had anything like that. So, again, some of it's follow-up, it's not just, helps people know that, maybe they're not just giving into the void, that these things are really going somewhere.
And I can certainly see how, from a nonprofit's point of view, donors who are big-time donors, they want to see their money going towards something that's making a positive impact in their community. So they want to see the story behind the client that benefited from this, or the volunteer that helped create something new. So yeah, I think that's really important. Now, taking those same tenets and applying that to a small business, there is 100% crossover, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, every business is going to have its mission. It just might look a little different. But I think, you're seeing that all over social media. Your traditional businesses want to put a human face to what they're doing, and they want to know that real people are using their products, or, whatever your business is. If you're in the service industry, what are your clients getting out of your business? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's 100% crossover on the same, you're using the same skills and reaping the same benefits. So
before we dive into kind of this practical tips and things, tell us a little bit about you. So how did you get to this point where you started your own business and thought, I'm an expert on these things? What was your journey in your career?
Oh man, I've been a freelancer most of my career, and I started doing that because I just really loved the flexibility, and I loved the ability to shift gears and sort of follow my curiosity. And then when we had kids, it was even more helpful to have that flexible schedule. So I've stuck with that. And, I've done a little bit of everything as far as writing. I've worked in PR, and I've worked in, marketing and communications, and more traditional journalism. And I did some fitness writing for a while. I mean, and when I started adding the photography element years ago, it just, that is sort of when it all clicked. I'd always loved photography, but I hadn't really made it a part of my business. And so that, I mean, I guess that's just when it felt like it gelled for me. Like, okay, I've got, this is how I want to tell stories,
So you were a writer first, and then you were adding on photography, not a photographer who added on writing.
Correct. Yeah. I kind of feel like I'm still figuring it out all the time. I mean, I'm still enjoying the ability to say, is this working for me? And do I want to shift gears at all? And
I think that's okay. I mean, that's what we all do as business owners. That's the thing that I think is so interesting. And I've been a business owner for 15 years now, and a lot of our listeners will message me and things. We forget that we actually have the power to choose. Like, we are the boss. Like, you think, oh, I just have to keep going and doing this thing that I actually hate to do, but it brings in the money. But you're like, wait, pause. You get to decide who you like to work with. You get to decide what types of products and services you put out in the world. And it's okay to refine and change and try something for a little bit and maneuver to what really makes your heart sing, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, especially, in my 40s, I mean, I think you got to really stay open to possibilities and be flexible. And, right now my job sort of forces me to do that. But I think no matter what your business is, it's really important at this time in our lives to really be open to new ideas and possibilities. So.
Yeah. So let's talk about practical tips on how to be a better storyteller in our business. So how do you use photos and words to tell a story?
Well, first of all, I want to say, like from the very beginning, it's really important to know your topic, know the kind of the central nugget of what you're trying to convey, or the mission of the project or the organization, and then do your homework, do some research. If you're interviewing someone, I always prepare questions, but I also have to leave open the room for possibilities, leave open room to shift gears, because, we're humans and we're having a conversation, and things can shift gears in better ways. And then, just being able to put people at ease, I think is so important. And I think for some people that comes naturally, but it's also something that you can practice, but just, part of that is really listening, and listening with empathy, and listening with leaving space, for answers, not in the back of your mind constantly thinking what the next question is, but really trying to, which is hard when you're interviewing someone. Your job is to keep things rolling, but ultimately your job as a storyteller is to listen, observe, and sort of facilitate their story, help them tell their story, not necessarily inject yourself into it so much. And then, I think this is especially relevant if you're taking photos, but really you do this with writing too. But if you can picture, like with your camera, you're setting the stage, you're taking these wide open photos, and then you're zooming in on the details, and and the same with writing and telling a story. Like there's this constant pulling back, zooming in, getting on some details, and for me that's just a good visual to remember, because every story is going to need to have kind of the big picture, set the stage, but then there are nice little nuggets of details that make it human, make it relevant.
Yeah. And it makes me kind of think of like the narrative arc. I mean, like when you go through any blockbuster movie that you've ever seen, right? You have a setting that's placed, a big wide open shot of where they're at, and then the hero shows up, and then, the journey that they take down the path and all that. And I imagine that is in some ways, can translate to taking photographs or, writing and blogging as well.
Yeah. And you could do that with Instagram posts. I mean, you can do that with an Instagram campaign. This is not just with big stories. You can do this with a 500-word profile. You can take people on this small journey of profiling one of your clients or, one of your stakeholders. I think that's important to remember. There's room for a narrative arc, no matter how small the story is, how small or big.
In your own life, are you telling the story of yourself in your social media, in your, like, how you present your business?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, am I actually going and
yeah,
doing that?
Are you doing that yourself? Yeah. Or do you find that you point the camera on other people and write about other people way more?
I tend to write about other people, but I do feel like if you're paying attention, that's also telling my story, and the Sibling Revelry Project is a great example, because family life is so important to me, and sibling life is just something I just really love and have, made this huge project about. But I think, anyway, it says something about me, what I choose to focus on, whether you're, I think even the clients I pick. I mean, I love community organizations, and I love the outdoors. So I, work with a lot of healthy outdoor, organizations, and I think that does say something about me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that you saying that in particular, choosing the clients that you're aligned with, helps you be a better storyteller, because you're actually passionate about whatever their mission is, or what they're passionate about as well, right? Like,
yes, absolutely.
I'm willing to bet if you got called by a tobacco company, saying, "Hey, make a marketing campaign for us," you'd probably be like,
Exactly.
no,
Actually, I wouldn't
thanks.
even have to think. I'd be like, wrong girl.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I think that's interesting to say because I know we have a lot of photographers that listen to the podcast as well. Is like who you choose as clients is really important too, right? Because
Yeah.
it helps you be really good at your work, or are you just taking the job because of the cash and then, regretting it later, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, done some photography work for this group called Marathon Kids that's based in Austin, but it's a national organization. And I mean, running is one of my huge passions. And, so injecting running with kids, I mean, it's like, it's a great fit for me. So, and I'm a good person for that job because I know how to photograph that. I know what that should look like and
Yeah.
what fun should look like. And,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And
tobacco companies, nah.
yeah, not so much. Not me either. Well, and it's just a gentle reminder to listeners out there. I mean, if you are a photographer or creative, I mean, don't be afraid to niche down and show people what projects, what types of clients you love, love, love to work with, because that helps attract those ultimate ideal clients to you. I think sometimes, especially new business owners, get nervous about niching down because they're like, well, I want to work with anybody, like anybody that wants to pay me, come on in.
Right.
But that's not always the best idea. Sure, you can take some jobs to build your portfolio, but if your jobs are all cigarette companies, guess what you're going to attract? More cigarette companies. So, something to consider. So let's zoom into what you're talking about with helping to make your subject more at ease. You mentioned that. Like, this is from Tips for the Photographer. How do people do that?
Well,
how do you do it?
Well, the way I do it, I keep things pretty simple. I don't shoot with a ton of equipment. I usually try to just pick one lens. I'll carry a second one with me, but usually I just have one lens that I've chosen. I rarely even use flash. I try to keep it not distracting. So that's, first of all, and if I'm interviewing at the same time, like if I'm doing something where I'm shooting and interviewing truly at the same time, I use like the voice memo app on my phone, like really simple. I have it in this dorky belt clip, on my hip, just so I'm hands free.
Yes.
And and then I just have my camera. And then, if I'm shooting, I try to get all my settings as close as I can before I even show up. Really, I'm checking the light before you're talking to people, just so there's not as many distractions. I'm not fiddling with the camera as much. And of course, you're changing as you go. But just that's something I try to do beforehand. And then as you're talking to people, I really try to make eye contact. You have to remember to pull the camera down and make some eye contact because it's. I mean, I don't really like to be photographed, honestly. I mean, it can be intimidating. You're just staring into that black void. So it's nice to remember to do that. The benefit of interviewing someone when you're doing that is that, you're kind of naturally putting the camera down. But I think it's good practice for any kind of photographer to remember to put the camera down. And
do you meet your guests, like your subject, beforehand, like at a different date than the shoot date as well, just so that you can make that bond? Or,
usually I don't, and some of that's just practical. I guess I've done that before with, I just really haven't done that very often. Usually it's the first time, and we spend a few minutes chatting. I always either call them or email them beforehand, and we talk about a few details. And I always try to say something like, we're all just trying to make each other look good. Like we're, try to set everybody at ease. Like this is, this is not hardcore journalism here. Like I'm not, we're just all here to tell a great story. I don't meet them beforehand. There's a lot of instant trying to build instant rapport. And I think, some of that is immediately, sharing something about myself, asking them, it's
and I imagine it's kind of reading the situation and reading the personality types, reading the nonverbal language, body language they're giving you, all of those things as well. Do they feel obligated to do it because their boss told them to and they're like, ugh? Or do they feel embarrassed about the situation in the story? I imagine, if you are photographing somebody who with chronic illness or something that's a bit devastating, it'd be hard to get a person to open up in front of camera, to really tell that story.
Yeah. And, I think if it were a tougher situation, I might really try to have a couple conversations like that beforehand or meet before. But, most of what I do, people are pretty happy to tell their story. Not everybody's comfortable in front of the camera.
Yep.
Sometimes if we just need a few photos for the story, I'll do the interview, we'll walk around, and then we'll take photos so that, we've gotten to know each other a little better. That is something that if possible, I'm walking with them the whole time we're talking. It's just not like, let's show up and stare at each other face to face, even though we've just met. I mean, there's something freeing about being able to talk and not have to make that constant eye contact. So,
yes.
It works out well for like a lot of the stories I do about parks, because we go to a park and we walk around and, they're showing me this or that or changes they've made. So, and I mean, I use that tip. I use that tip with my kids. Like when we're having trouble, we go on a walk because they will talk so much more when we're shoulder to shoulder instead of eye to eye.
Right, right. And do you scout locations beforehand when you shoot, or do you just wing it and say, well, let's see what we can find?
I usually scout beforehand, but again, it depends on the story. Sometimes you have to go to the place that, this story is about. But even then, I usually go, scout it out just to kind of get a feel for, okay, we're going to be at this time of day and the sun's going to be, really bright or this, this direction. So, but I also, it's kind of part of the fun to show up and be like, well, let's see, what are we going to do? I mean, sometimes that's fun. Sometimes that's stressful, but
yeah. I imagine the creative process can be, you have to be different every single time. So you had told me earlier that you typically do a 1 hour interview with people and you distill all of that down into 10 photos and 10 quotes to tell the story. Is that a rule of thumb that's worked for you or something that you learned from somewhere else?
Well, that's what I do with the Sibling Revelry Project.
So tell us about that project.
Okay, so I'll back up with that. So that is something I started about a year and a half ago, and I'd been, photographing families and, of course, my kids, and then, when you spend an hour with a family, you're naturally just talking to them or asking, getting the kids to do different things, or and I kept wanting to capture those quotes. So I said, this is what I need to do. I need to just package this all together. So anyway, I started this project, and the idea is that I'm photographing and interviewing siblings of all ages and backgrounds. The youngest I've interviewed I think she was 3 and had her brand new baby brother. I interviewed a pair of sisters who were 89 and 92.
Wow.
And so it's been really fun. But yeah, I spend some time with them, an hour, depending on how big the group is, an hour up to maybe 2 hours. And I distill the quotes and the images to about 8 to 10 photos and quotes. And you end up with this little vignette of their relationship, a slice. I don't even try to portray their whole relationship. But what I hope to do is create this little mini story about this slice of their relationship. And, you kind of come away with seeing like these universal truths of siblinghood and family life. And it's been really fun.
What have been some aha moments from that? Like, what have you noticed as patterns?
Well, those 89, 92-year-old sisters were still making jokes about, she was daddy's favorite. And, when she didn't get credit for something, boy, she made sure that, mom and dad knew. I mean, which my kids could have said that. I mean, It's just so funny. Some of the dynamics don't change. But yet I think some of them do, like you're interviewing, I interviewed a set of 5 siblings who were like, in their 40s, and they had so many great stories about, intense fighting and just rivalry and and now 3 of them work together. Like they're all really tight. Like they still, all 5 of them have this really tight bond, incredible communication. I mean, they're just a really neat family. So it's, I don't know. I love that you can see that some things change and some things never change, and some things absolutely like build this foundation for a great relationship later. So
yeah, and the photo project, we'll put a link in the show notes so people can check it out. It is so beautiful, Liz. What I think is so nice about the photos that you've got in this project is that you show a truly authentic angle and side to families that isn't too filtered and glossed over. I think that what I like, there's one photo in particular on your website where I think it's like a little girl and she's wearing like a cowboy skirt and cowboy boots, and you see her scuffed up knee and you see her sister, and it's like, yes, that's actually what family life is all about. It is a bit messy. It's not too perfect, matchy. This is telling a deeper story to it. And again, I think that translates as a business owner, as a nonprofit. How can you incorporate these deeper storytelling elements into the photos you take, the words you put on your blog, the marketing materials you put out to the world?
Yeah. People want to see that. They want to see their lives reflected, in online and everything they're seeing. I mean, it's validating, to see the details, to see those scuffed knees and, ripped pants, that it's, kids fighting, kids working it out. I mean, it's, I think people want to see some imperfections, not false imperfections, but just, humanity. I mean, my gosh, I feel like we can't get enough humanity these days. Anytime we can inject humor and heart into the world right now, I feel like that's really important.
It's what people need right now. Yeah.
I think it's what we need. Yeah.
Especially to heal. I mean, there's so much turmoil in world politics and all of that right now. So for you then, Liz, how do you decide how much or how little you share? So you've taken the photos, you've written the words, you're now trying to figure out, what am I going to publish out into the world? Do you have a rule of thumb, either personally for your life or professionally?
Well, professionally, I would go back to like the central core mission of your business, your organization, your project. For my sibling project, sometimes I get these hilarious or profound quotes from siblings, but it might be about family life or their parents or something. And I think, oh, that's such a great, funny quote. But if it doesn't go back to siblinghood, I don't use it, So for that, it's difficult to kind of pick something. But, in other ways, the story reveals itself. I mean, you go back and you listen to the audio and the sort of narrative reveals itself. But going back to that core, I think with professional, personally, when I share photos of my family online, but my goal is always to share my perspective, like me as a mother. So me experiencing them, I try not to just, I don't always succeed, but that is always my goal. Like me experiencing this whole family life, not like, oh, I'm going to just tell her story or tell his story. It's, so if I keep that in mind, I usually can kind of land where I'm comfortable, and my kids are comfortable as well.
So I'm curious then, I mean, getting back to kind of authenticity as well, it's tricky. I think in this day and age of Instagram filters and, everybody seems to have a size 0 waistline and a perfect house and a perfect life. Like, how do you balance that? Because I imagine as a photographer taking pictures of other people, those other people want to put their best face forward, right? They want to show up in their best clothes. They want you to make sure they, some people make like, have you got my good angle? Do I look whatever? How do you get through all the nonsense and really get down to the root of it?
Well, again, I think it depends on who you're working with. And I think, trying to set the stage beforehand as much as you can. If I were taking somebody's holiday cards, I just know that that's going to be it. They're probably going to want something different than if they've agreed to be, if they've agreed to be a part of my sibling project. I lay it out there like, this is, you don't have to clean your house. Like your house is not the showcase. It won't even show up. This is all about them. I really try to lay the groundwork there, but,
everybody doesn't have to be in khaki pants
no,
and
I'm like,
a white stiff collared shirt.
No, I'm like, does your kid wear that on Saturday? I mean, so, it's, most people get it, I think, if they've looked at my work.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, if you go and you photograph someone and they think they want the perfect picture, and then you get the picture that's not quite perfect because, so-and-so's looking this direction and so-and-so elbowing this one, that's the one they end up loving. I mean, because it's real and they're like, oh my gosh, you captured that. That happens every day. And now I have a picture of it. I mean, that's what people want. So sometimes you're giving people what they don't know that they want. And you just have to be that person.
Yeah. So, we talked about the Sibling Revelry Project. Make sure to click on the link down below to be able to check it out. What does it reveal to you about the messy and beautiful layers of familyhood, siblinghood, and capturing that on camera? What's that taught to you about creative storytelling?
Well, I think there's real power in joy in being able to look at something and messy and still find the beauty in that. It's sort of liberating. I'm just a naturally positive person. And I think sometimes maybe that can come across as naive, but I've learned over the years that there's some real power in being able to approach the world in a positive way and really embrace it all. I mean, believe me, I get super annoyed. My kids fight, all of that. But, when I'm at my best, I'm able to sort of transcend that and be like, oh yeah, this is what I signed up for. This is the crazy chaos and I love it. So again, being able to embrace that and kind of celebrate it, I think it's powerful and it's liberating.
So what have you learned then doing the Sibling Revelry Project? How has that inspired or changed how you approach your other work that you do for other clients?
Well, I think I'm more confident in being able to tell people you need to put this human face on your project and organization. And I've seen the rewards of that. And then, just practically speaking, I think, remembering that when you're photographing people, no matter what kind of project it is, talking to people, getting to know them, I mean, that can't be replaced because you will see the benefits in the photos. And, talking to people as they're doing it. I mean, as you're shooting, because, it's intimidating just staring at a camera instead of like a friendly photographer. I mean, everything as small as like moving my camera down and remembering to smile, instead of like looking at my settings, all focused and stern, remembering to look at the people.
Yeah. So. I think I read a New York Times article recently that talked about in the last 20 or 30 years, moms in particular have stopped showing up in photographs with their family. And because it has to do with this fear that I'm not the right size, I don't look very good in the swimsuit, or it's just best if I'm the one taking the photograph and, not in the picture. And it broke my heart when I read it, because I can certainly relate to that as a mom myself. There have been times where I'm like, I don't really feel so great, so I'm going to be taking the pictures and I'm not going to be in front of the camera. What would you say to that person to encourage them? We're not talking about business. We're just talking about being in front of the camera. What would you say to her?
Yeah. I mean, I get it, first of all. I get it as a mom, and I get it as a female. I get it as a photographer because, I've got the better eye. I can make this look better. I think some of it is a control thing with us, especially, if you're the mom who's, making it all happen, it can kind of be your natural instinct to pull back and let everybody else experience it. But I know that when my kids see pictures of all of us or just of me and them, like, it makes them really happy. And I know that if we're looking back at pictures, like, they don't care what I look like in the picture. Mm-hmm. So
most times they don't even notice. Like they
no.
just don't even register that detail. It's in your head and not in other people's whatsoever.
Absolutely. And just from a personal standpoint, I mean, my mom got sick when I was very young, and she was sick most of my all of my childhood, most of it. And I don't have a ton of pictures of us doing things like this. So that honestly, that's in the back of my mind that, I want my kids to not just remember this, but, it's important to have some images, something they can hold on to that's like, oh yeah, this was a great day.
Yeah.
We're all in here.
Yeah.
Look at Mom's big smile. So
yeah, so just do it.
Yeah,
so
just do it.
I ask these questions to a lot of our guests that come on the podcast. First and foremost, thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight. And I think hopefully photographers that are listening, as well as people who are just about to get their photographs taken, either for business or personally, will be inspired by some of the tips that you shared. But tell us, what's one book that you're reading right now or blog that's either inspiring you or maybe poking holes at you and challenging you a bit?
Well, Austin Kleon is a writer and artist, and he's somebody I've followed for years, and he actually inspires and challenges. So I think it's a good mix because, he seems to be just really disciplined writer, artist, blogger. I mean, so I'm constantly inspired by that, and just where he is, what he's putting out there always seems to be exactly one step ahead about what I need to hear. Mm-hmm. So he's somebody I think I will always keep following online.
Yeah, so he's got the book, How to Steal Like an Artist, and we'll put a link in the show notes for his work as well. His work is excellent.
Yeah, and then he has and then Show Your Work was his second book, and then he has a new one coming out called, I believe it's called Keep Going. Mm-hmm. And again, it's like exactly what I need. Like, how do you maintain this momentum for creative life? And so yeah, he writes a lot about creative life and, building that kind of business. So
brilliant. Tell us, is there maybe a good app or tool that you're using right now in your own life that helps you simplify?
I'm pretty simple on the apps, but I will say, most of my professional work, I use my Canon, but if I'm using my iPhone, I love Snapseed, which is a photo editing app. That's my go-to photo editing app.
Great. Perfect. So who is maybe one person in your network or circle of friends and colleagues that you think we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why?
Okay. I think you should definitely interview Nancy Davis Coe, who's has a website and podcast called Midlife Mixtape.
Cool.
And she writes about midlife and what does she call it? The years between being hip and breaking one. And
it's my kind of girl.
Yeah, exactly. But she interviews really interesting people on her podcast, and, just all about like where they are in midlife and like what they're, looking back and looking forward. And then she's also just recently signed this book deal to write a book about the power of thank you notes. Because when she turned 50, she just decided as a personal project, she was going to write 50 thank you notes to family and friends. And then it was over that year. And then it was such a life-changing experience for her that she's like, everybody needs to do this. Mm-hmm. And so she got a book deal. And so she's currently working on that. I think it comes out next year.
Excellent.
But she's great. You would love her.
Oh, she totally sounds like my kind of girl. Yeah. So Liz, tell us, gratitude and simplicity, in my mind, go hand in hand. Tell us, what's one thing you're grateful for right now in your life?
Well, I'm really grateful for my family and my kids. And I feel like, they keep me curious, and they are constantly teaching me compassion, helping me lead with empathy and compassion. Two of my kids are teenagers, and it's like a daily opportunity at empathy, living with them and remembering it's not always easy to kind of figure out who you are and be a teenager today. And so, I'm really grateful for them. Just all the lessons that come with family life.
Yeah. So just a reminder to everybody, you can find Elizabeth McGuire. She's at Sibling Revelry Project on Instagram. Also, if you go to siblingrevelryproject.com, you'll receive a free PDF of her top tips for capturing great family moments. And that's where you can get signed up to her free mailing list. So make sure to check that out. And the link's in our show notes as well. So one last question for you, Liz. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. If somebody is listening to this episode, and let's take it from the point of view of somebody who's just about to get professional headshots or personal branding photos done. But you know what? She's freaking out because she does not like to be in front of the camera. What's one thing that you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her?
I would probably say what makes you happy? Like I might ask her, what can you think about that? Like, what was the last thing you did that was fun? Hopefully that wouldn't stress them out that they haven't had enough fun lately. But, I guess I would take the emphasis off. You look great. You look, because it's not about how you look. Like, how are you feeling? Help them focus on something like a good memory, something they're looking forward to. So anything to do to take the emphasis off. How do I look? Is my face right? Am I smiling? Are my eyes open enough? Is this a good angle? Because the more the better you feel inside, it's going to come out. So
yeah, maybe pop up some of your favorite tunes while you're doing the shoot as well, just so you can
absolutely
loosen
absolutely.
up.
Yes.
Liz, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you.